every day I've been reading whatever Father has listed.
Yeah.
So, and then I also got a book as a gift with different readings, and they're not necessarily for every day, but everyone has a beautiful border or a picture, thing, and they thought I would be interested in that more than anything because they know I do calligraphy, but this stuff is beautiful, but it's not calligraphy. It's, all kinds of beautiful things and stuff, but I thought the art, well, I never really thought of myself as an artistic person, but, I did learn calligraphy.
So you
That's
must
an
have
art.
some artistic
That
talent.
is an art.
Yeah.
Well, someone told me crochet is an art too, I don't know.
It is.
I just like to do it. Actually, I learned to do calligraphy kind of on a dare,
Where's Mary going?
ladies' room.
Oh, I was gonna say where she could start.
She said, I think I better make
Oh,
a
I see, I
trip
didn't
before
hear.
you start. Yeah, I learned calligraphy
There's some
kind of on a
things
dare
that wait for no one.
more than.
Learn calligraphy
Very
where?
good at it.
Well,
Louise?
you know what happened when I was,
You learned calligraphy where?
it was kind of like just to prove someone wrong. When I started in the Allen Park schools, I was working at the high school. And the high school art teacher was a fantastic lady, and she happened to do something with a little calligraphy on it, and I admired it. Well, then she tells us her niece is getting married, and they're having a very small wedding of like 15, 20 people.
Mm.
Well, you could not order that small amount of, she needed like 10 invitations.
Invitations, yeah.
So the woman wrote them in calligraphy on this beautiful parchment, and she showed it to me, and I admired it. Well, a week or so later, one of the men teachers comes in who's teaching math, and he's having a bad day, and he says to her, I'm so glad I teach math and not art. She said, why is that? He said, with math, 2 and 2 is 4.
Always four.
With art, you have to have talent. She said, oh, no, that's not necessarily true. There's certain skills and stuff, whatever. I said, well, I don't know. I can't draw a stiff person. She said, I'm telling you, Louise, if you went through it, you could learn it. I said, you mean anybody can learn that writing that you do? Oh, yeah. I said, I don't believe it. She said to me, go to the store and get a calligraphy marker and bring in a tablet with lined paper, and I will teach you. And I said, well, where do I get a chisel point marker? And she tells me at the time, their shopping center up here was a big thing, and they had a Macaulay's. She said, go in there. They have them. So I go in there. They're like $1 each. And I'm thinking, at that time, that was a lot for a marker. I thought, well, I can waste $1, so I buy one. Every day for a week on my 15-minute break, she showing me how to do it, go home and do so much homework, come back, she'd circle and, oh, you're not holding your pen right, oh, you didn't slant your paper or whatever. By the end of the week, I knew how to
You
do
were
it.
doing it.
Wow.
I'm impressed.
It would take me a year to figure out how to do that stuff.
Well, I mean, she wanted so many pages every night. And this man teacher who, the guy who was complaining about teaching math also did calligraphy. He said, oh, she'll never do that many pages. And I thought, you snack. Well, of course, I had to do that many pages, right? And so every day I would bring it in and she'd take a red pen like she was correcting a paper and circle and whatever. And I did, every day I thought I'm going to get less red circles, right? And sure enough. But like, I never set out to learn it. It just happened. But then if you don't,
Useful skill.
if you don't keep doing it, you lose it. And when I broke my
Yeah.
arm, it was after the therapy they gave me, it was very good therapy to do it. And then Father John likes it, and every once in a while he'll ask me to do something, or, I'll do envelopes. I used to do all my parents' Christmas cards and stuff. I've done invitations for people's weddings and place cards and different things.
We did a nice job on those labels for the soups and things.
Oh, yeah, I did that for
That was cool.
that soup and thing that we had when we had Vespers 2 weeks ago. That worked out pretty well, I thought.
Well, let's get started, shall we?
Had enough soup now.
Yes.
Others are on their
Yeah,
way,
I showed
but
up then.
Well, we're way over.
Wait,
Yeah.
wait.
they've been slowed.
Sure, John.
Oh, by the way, Father didn't announce it, but the Guild is taking orders for Pascha breads and butters. If anyone would like to order one,
Uh-huh.
You can get the pascas with or without raisins. Pascas are $15 each, butters are $5 each, whatever you think about it. Order up to the week before Palm Sunday, because Palm Sunday you'll be picking them up, just in case anyone wants one or wants to think about it or
Okay, good.
doesn't want one.
Heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, everywhere present and filling all things, treasury of blessings, and giver of life, come and dwell within us, cleanse us of all stain, and save our souls, O gracious one. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Get some extra people, great.
Friars.
Oh, hi.
Oh, great.
We're not positive how long we'll be able to stay.
If you leave early, we'll shoot you. so.
Oh, yeah.
We might forgive you.
You gotta slip.
Martin, you can sit. Oh, you're all set.
Okay,
Another one?
let's
There
see.
is, yeah.
We could do introductions around.
Or he'll-
Your brothers want to introduce yourselves? We can do introductions around.
And you can introduce yourself too.
Yeah.
I'm brother Greg. We're from the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity. We serve in Southwest Detroit. I'm in seminary, and brother is in formation for permanent brotherhood.
He's from Philadelphia.
I'm from Philadelphia.
I'm from DC.
And your name is?
My brother Andrew. He's from
So for their benefits, we should introduce ourselves. Martin, you want to start around?
I'm
Or you already did it?
yes.
You know.
I'm Alice Farias.
I'm Louise, and I'm Kevin's wife, and I'm the one who drums up interest in coming to this. Or I try.
Vital role.
I'm Louise's husband, Kevin.
Father John, we met already, yeah.
Hi, I'm Louise Doble.
I'm Mary Hendricks, I'm with you.
Okay.
Deacon Lawrence.
I'm Francesca, and this is my daughter Emanuela.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see, we have some housekeeping to do, which is when are we starting and when are we ending? So I figure that we take an hour on this. Does that sound like reasonable? Okay, so we should decide, I think it would be helpful if we had a regular starting time.
Depends on how long the liturgy lasts.
Yeah, but, well,
Well, I still think we should be able to start by 12:15.
yeah,
What'd
so
she say?
12:15. So it's real 12:15, which is different from the 12:15 on the clock
That's
in
right,
there. Because that clock is slow, right?
Yeah.
By an
So-
hour.
Huh?
Well, now it's by an hour, yeah.
Yeah, but it's
But it's
It's
even slow by a few
also
minutes.
like it's about 6 minutes or something like that. All right, so anyway, we'll start at real 12:15
Real 12:15.
and go to 1:15. Yes? Does that seem okay?
Seems okay, just, I will probably always be late, just like this morning, I locked the door. Somebody forgot to blow some candles out and all this other stuff.
Yeah, right.
Get over to,
Well, I mean, maybe we can't all be here at 12:15, but around 12:15 is when we'll start.
Yeah.
Liturgy will be shorter after Pascha.
Pardon?
Liturgy will be shorter after
You want
Pascha.
to go back to St. John Chrysostom? St. Basil behind for for the long
Till
camp. right?
Christmas.
Okay, all right, so good. So we are up to Ruth chapter 2. It's 2 weeks since we read chapter 1. It's kind of an unfortunate gap. But, so we're chapter 1. This is a family from Bethlehem, Elimelech and Naomi and their sons, Machlon and Chilion. There's a famine. They go across the Jordan River to the east and live there for at least 10 years, during which time the two sons marry local girls. And then the father dies, Elimelech, and then both of the sons die, Chilion and Machlon, leaving Naomi and her two daughters-in-law. And so then she hears that God has kind of restored the agricultural fortunes of people back on the other side of the Jordan River in Judah and Bethlehem area. So she sets out to return home. She encourages the two daughters-in-law to go back to their families of origin, and one of them, Orpah, does, and the other, Ruth, insists on staying with Naomi and returns to Bethlehem with her. For Ruth, it's not returning. For Ruth, it's going away. But Naomi, she goes with Naomi, who's returning. So that's chapter 1. So we could read chapter 2. These are not long chapters here, like we did last time. Before we talk about it, it's on page 43 here in the little booklet. Let's see, readers that we could use. We could use a couple of guys to read the parts of Boaz and the servant, and then we have Ruth and Naomi, and we could use a narrator. So
I'll be
two
narrator.
guys. Okay, you'll be the narrator. Martin, you want to be
Boaz?
Boaz? Okay. Deacon Lawrence is eating, so I'll be the servant. Okay, and then we need Naomi and Ruth.
I'll be Naomi.
Okay, and Ruth.
I'm Peter.
Okay, all right. So
All right. Now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi,
Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose sight I may find favor.
she said to her.
Oh, my God.
So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers,
The Lord be with you.
They answered,
the Lord
Lord
bless
bless
you. We can all stand.
Then Boaz said to his servant, who was in charge of the reapers.
To whom does this young woman belong?
The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered,
She's the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting even for a moment.
Then Boaz said to Ruth,
Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn.
Then she fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him,
Why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me while I am a foreigner?
But Boaz answered her,
All that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to the people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge.
Then she said,
May I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants.
At mealtime Boaz said to her,
Come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine.
So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men.
Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her.
So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She picked it up and came into the town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. Her mother-in-law said to her,
Where did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you.
So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said,
The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz.
Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law,
Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead.
Naomi also said to her,
The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kinsmen.
Then Ruth the Moabite said,
He even said to me, Stay close by my servants until they have finished all my harvest.
Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law,
It is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Otherwise, you might be bothered in another field.
So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law.
Okay, good. So we could take up the questions for careful reading on the next page. As a way of beginning to explore the text. So Boaz appears early in the chapter here. What kind of impression do you get of him as he appears here?
He seems like a good man.
Because?
He seems to take care of her. He's heard that what she has done, and now he's honoring that and protecting her.
Yeah.
Even in,
In charge.
He's in charge? Yes. Right. Yeah, right away.
A good man with enough wisdom and experience also to recognize that not all men are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
even from,
Wait, and how do we know that?
Because he's concerned that other men might bother.
Yes, the young man, that's right. Yes, that's right.
but even from his first words in verse 4, he doesn't come up to the people who are working for him and say, I don't know, something like a slave driver would say. He's very gracious to them. I mean, I don't know if it was customary for people like him to greet servants like that, to say the Lord be with you.
Maybe, might be.
Yeah. I mean, it gives
Traditional
an impression
culture.
of him as somebody who cares about people,
Yeah.
whether or not that's true. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is.
So when Ruth is going and it says she hopes to go and have someone find favor, is she going to attract a man to then take care of them?
Oh, that's a good question. This is one of a number of what seem to be what some of the commentators think are deliberate ambiguities in the story. And so like sometimes like one commentator will say, oh, she just means like she'll find someone who favors her because she's a dependent person. So she needs someone to take an interest in her and do something good for her. But there can also be this other secondary sense of like for a woman to find favor, and it's going to be like it's going to be a man because it's a patriarchal society. So the fields are being operated by the guys who are in control of the property. The ambiguities become really dense in chapter 3 in the next chapter. But already in this chapter, these kind of ambiguities, like different ways of reading things. So that's one of them.
I wondered, spoiler alert, but I wondered if Ruth knew about the Israelite tradition, that a relative takes care of a widowed spouse.
Well, there's that, and then there's also just knowing, does she know about the kind of like the practices for poor people being able to glean? There's no certain way of answering that. The short story is so short.
Yeah.
There's just so little background. It tells us so little about what the people are thinking or know. So one way to read it is she's kind of acquainted with the fact that like gleaning is something poor people are allowed to do. Because she doesn't ask Naomi, well, what do we do now? She takes the initiative and says, I'm going to go gleaning. So maybe they do that in Moab too. And then also when Naomi introduces at the beginning, she says, oh, I'm sorry, not Naomi. The narrator tells us that there's this wealthy relative. So this introduces the idea of, well, you have relatives and relatives have responsibility in this culture to take care of each other. Doesn't Ruth know that? Maybe she doesn't know all the ins and outs of how they do it in Bethlehem as a
And
foreigner.
it certainly doesn't sound like she knows about Boaz.
No, because, and that's quite clear because it says, verse 3, as it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. So the narrator has told us, the readers, in the first verse, there's this guy named Boaz who's a relative of theirs, but Ruth doesn't know, and she just happens to find her way to the field that belongs to Boaz, so she doesn't know him.
Naomi knows who he is.
Yes, then Naomi says, oh, well, he's a relative at the beginning.
Why didn't she contact Boaz?
And this is another question. Why hasn't Naomi contacted Boaz? Or Boaz, when he meets Ruth, says, oh, I heard all about how you took care of Naomi and came back with her. It's like, so why hasn't Boaz done something? There's an ambiguity really with at the beginning when it says that he's a prominent rich man in the first verse. So the word for it's the word that lies behind rich. So it means like he's a worthy person. So worthy can have like he's a worthy member of the community. He's a more affluent, more established member of the community. He's a richer guy. That's the way they translated it here. Or it could be like he's a worthy person. He's a person of real integrity and character. People admire the way he lives and conducts himself. Or it could mean both. But if the way it's understood is that he's rich, then it really introduces this question right at the beginning, like, well, why hasn't he done something for Naomi and Ruth? He's heard about them. He knows Naomi's come back. He's a relative of Elimelech, her husband, who's died. Why hasn't he taken action? So these are questions that the author seems to be raising, and then it draws the reader in. You want to explore like exactly what's going on here, without trying to answer the questions. But these are questions about like why hasn't Naomi contacted Boaz? Why hasn't Boaz contacted Naomi? Good questions. Right? Well, okay, so we're moving at a rapid pace from question to
I was
question.
just wondering if
Yes.
maybe the initial question we asked about like what exactly was she anticipating or looking for when it said, let me go to the field and glean that I may be behind someone in whose sight I may find favor, like what she meant by favor there. I was wondering if in verse 10, where it says, when Boaz interacts with her, she says, why have I found favor?
Right.
in your sight?"
Right.
They should take notice of me. I was wondering maybe if that would answer to like sort of telling us what were her expectations and hopes going in. What did she mean when she said find favor? Well, she says that now that a person with means like has kind of looked upon her and been a benefactor for her. She's
Right. Treating her
I have
kindly.
found favor.
Right.
I found-
Right. Yeah, so I think like the primary meaning at the beginning is I got to look for someone who's going to treat me kindly and let me do the gleaning in his field, right? And then Boaz is focusing attention on her, and so I said, oh, this is it. This is the favor that she's been looking for. But as I said, there is this other level of possible meaning in a woman saying, I'm going to go like find favor in somebody's eyes. It's like the perceptive reader says, Ruth is a single woman in a new town, and there's a lot of guys around, and so what's like, also where she says, in verse 13, she says, may I continue to find favor in your sight? Same phrase. And she says, you've comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant. It's, the Hebrew is literally, you've spoken to my heart. And that's used a few other times in the Old Testament. And some of the times when it's used, it's got a romantic sense. You know, she spoke to his heart, or he spoke to her heart. It's like, like, you know, Cupid's arrow is, you know. So, yeah, okay. So, well, let's see if we
Well,
can move on
you don't
to
think,
question 2.
you don't think this is like, she's not, this is something that the narrator wants us to notice, right? It's not something that Ruth, like,
Oh, no, maybe Ruth is.
like she's attracted to Boaz?
No,
Is that
the
what
other
you're
way
saying?
around.
Oh,
The other way around. That, like Ruth, if you think of this from Ruth's point of view, so she's a stranger in town, and she probably asks the foreman, can I glean here? And the foreman says, okay, apparently. So she's working there. And then Boaz comes. And then Boaz focuses all his attention on her. So a woman might wonder, why is this guy focusing all of this attention on me?
it's true. He doesn't just let her glean. He says, you know, and I've ordered the young man not to bother you.
And also
He
at
goes above
at
and
lunchtime,
beyond.
he says, come sit with me.
Yeah,
And they have lunch together.
yeah.
And so one commentator says she knows when a guy's trying to sweet talk her.
Well, the other thing is, I was reading the footnotes in my Bible, that usually when you're gleaning, they're reaping and you're picking up what falls on the ground.
Right.
And he tells them, let her glean even from the stuff that's still standing, which is not
Well,
apparently.
it's not,
From the
it's,
sheep.
it's not that
yeah,
it's,
from the-
That's up to-
yeah, it's not that it's standing. I think what happens is the guys have like cutting tools, and they go first through the field, and the gals come behind, and they gather it up into bundles.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then gleaners are behind. What's not gathered up into bundles, that's just lying around, they could pick up.
Yeah,
So he's telling her, you get up with the gals, and so you can gather a lot of stuff. So she's not getting the standing grain. The guys are cutting the grain, and then, but she can just take
but he's
as
letting him
much as she
take
wants.
more
Oh, it's,
than
oh,
than
yes.
would normally a
She
gleaner would
gets,
get.
no one's sure how big an ephah is, which it says at the end that she gets, but she takes home an ephah. So that's like estimated maybe 30 to 50 pounds.
No, I looked it up and it says, and if it means bushel, so that would be right.
Well, it's,
A
yeah,
bushel of,
so
a bushel of wheat,
it's
Barley,
a barley.
barley.
barley's light.
There's no way to know precisely how much it is, but the estimates range from, this would be about 30 to 50 pounds of grain. And
That's a lot of barley.
she's threshed it, so it's, so he's not treating her as a gleaner, he's treating her as though she's one of his work crew. But she's taking the stuff for herself and Naomi. So he's really going out of his way. So that's why, like, you know, she's saying, wow, I really found favor, kind of like, why, you know? And so like, she might begin to think like, well, I don't know, there's this guy, he's taking a big interest in me. Is there perhaps some particular reason for his interest? Like,
In verse 13, she even identifies herself as a servant, even though I'm not one of your servants.
even though I'm not one of your
Yeah.
servants, right?
Yeah.
That's right. You're treating me like one
Yeah.
of your servants. Yeah.
And it sounds like he knows that she's a relative, but she doesn't know.
No, she doesn't know. That's right. She doesn't know till she gets home and talks to Naomi.
But
So
she's
then
not
in-
really
Oh,
related
yeah,
by
that's right.
blood, right?
Well, Elimelech and Boaz were apparently a
Blood
fit.
relative.
Yes.
But-
So then there's Naomi and
Makes her
she's
part
the
of
son.
family.
Oh,
She's
Naomi,
not
but not Ruth. Ruth is not a blood relative.
No, she's the wife, the widow
Right.
of Mahlon.
But once you're in the
Oh, no,
family,
so-
you're in the family.
Right. Okay, well, we're moving at our accustomed rate of speed. That was question one.
One
So-
question was.
We touched on question 3.
Okay, we touched on question 3. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, all right. Let's look at number 4 about Naomi. So is she different here at the beginning, end of chapter 2 compared to end of, in how she was in chapter 1, or what's going on with it, Naomi here?
I'll just say you give us a huge hint by the subtitle that you picked for that last part. Naomi perks
Oh,
up.
yeah, okay, all right. All right, yeah. That's
She's
true.
all like so
She's
down
not so
and-
bitter
Yeah,
anymore.
she's bitter and discouraged and not very talkative at
All that
in the first
grain.
part of the story. But then Ruth shows up with all this grain and it's like,
Hey.
whoa, so much to eat. And then she finds out what field it was. And whoa, this is, and all of a sudden, things start to turn in her mind and she comes up with an idea.
Right.
Could I suggest a Yiddish term? She's no longer vetching.
Yes, yeah, that's what she's doing at the end of chapter 1.
Yeah.
Call me bitter, don't call me, Naomi means like kind or like pleasant.
It's just so much easier to be kind and pleasant when things are going well.
Well, part of the thing with Naomi though is not just that, is she like a bit sour tempered at the end of chapter 1 or something, but in our
Yeah.
discussion, we talked about it, it's a little bit like Job.
Yeah.
God took me out full and brought me back empty. God's dealt harshly or badly with me, she says. My husband died, both my sons died. So that means that tracking changes in Naomi are part of this is one strand of the book, what's going on with Naomi. And so if in chapter 1, she has this understanding of how God has dealt with her, that he's dealt harshly with her. Now, is she going to come to some other view of how God is now dealing with her? Is she going to feel like she's in a new phase of God's dealings with her?
Well, verse
It's-
20 would seem to indicate that.
It's in process. Maybe she's in process here.
Well, I wondered, because she came back to Israel, and I don't know if she was the same family as her husband, I know that does happen. But she must have known, well, she might not have known who was left, that they had relatives still in the town.
Yeah.
And I wondered, did she forget about them? Did she not know? Or is this the old, if you say too many good things, you turn the evil eye on yourself?
Maybe she wasn't having any high hopes of the relatives coming to her aid, or she didn't want to jinx anything by getting high expectations, or
Maybe she didn't know who was still there. Because hadn't there been a famine or something?
Right. and she's been gone at least 10 years.
Yeah, people might have died.
She might have thought the worst.
Mhm. It seems like her view of God has, well, I don't know if it's changed or if it's become more nuanced, but like back in the first chapter, when she comes back, she says, "The Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. He's brought me back empty." And here in verse 20, she's talking about the Lord whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. So. it's like-
So here's another ambiguity. Right, this is verse 20. So blessed be he by the Lord. Okay, the he is Boaz and the Lord is the Lord. Whose? So who is whose? So it follows after the Lord. Okay, the Lord has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead. Or is she referring to Boaz? She's blessing Boaz because he hasn't forgotten his kindness to the living and the dead. he's recalled that he's a relative of ours, and he's gone out of his way to take care of his relative, Ruth, and her mother-in-law, Naomi. And that's why Boaz, is to be blessed by the Lord, because Boaz has begun to act in such a kind and faithful way. And then another commentator will say, well, don't say, is it the Lord or is it Boaz? Because it's like the author is being ambiguous in a meaningful way, maybe suggesting like, well, how is it that God would be showing his kindness? Boaz, right? It's not some miracle that's occurring. But if Boaz is showing kindness, where does the kindness originate from? Somehow it's God showing kindness through Boaz. So the ambiguity of the statement is suggesting that there's some sort of, it's maybe touching on one of the topics of the book, which is what is the interrelationship or the interaction between God doing things in people's lives and people doing things in each other's lives.
That God's kindness comes through other people.
Well, I mean, when you realize the ambiguity,
Yeah.
when you say, well, who is whose, and then you think about it, then you're led into thinking about this question of whose kindness is being expressed here? God's? Boaz's? Both? How does, there's another ambiguity like this. When Ruth is talking to Boaz in verse 13. Okay, so Boaz has just said, go back to verse 12. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to find refuge. So he's talking about the Lord. And Ruth says, may I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me. So she's not, he's saying, you've taken refuge in the God of Israel by coming back with Naomi. And she doesn't respond on that level of talking about like in what way she's become an Israelite or what kind of faith in God she had, the God of Israel she has, or anything like that, or whether that was in her mind at all when she came back with Naomi. But she just responds to him. She says, may I continue to find favor in your sight. It's like, she doesn't pick up on his talking about God, but she focuses on, you are helping me. And may you continue to help me because I need help. But she says, my Lord. And she uses the Hebrew word, which sometimes it can just mean like, it can mean like in human relationships, someone who's like considerably above you on the social scale, a guy, you call him the Lord. But the word is also applied to God. In fact, last time we were talking about the name of God and the Hebrew name of God in the Old Testament, that personal name in the tradition in Judaism, you don't pronounce it. When you come to it, you use this word, which means Lord. So there the ambiguity is like, well, on one level, she's just talking to Boaz, and it should be translated Lord with a small L, like they do here. Right? Boaz is just Lord, my Lord, in the sense of you're like the revered landowner on whom I'm dependent. But the reader knows, oh, this is the word that gets used for God. And Boaz has just been talking about God.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so where is her help? Where is she finding favor? Where is she getting comfort? Where is this kindness coming to her from? Well, it's coming from Boaz. And
The Lord.
somehow the Lord, capital L, is kind of, is sort of like in the picture there, the reader can't help hearing Adonai. Oh, that's the same word as
So
God.
was that convention already alive when Ruth was written? Of saying Adonai instead of the name of the Lord?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because that would really change the the sonics of this. Like if a reader was reading Ruth out loud,
But even if it wasn't,
yeah,
sometimes Adonai is used
for Lord.
directly to God.
Right.
So just that
Connection's
usage.
there
would be
anyway.
enough.
But to hear it twice in succession like that would have made it even
Oh, that's true. If you're
Because-
reading it in Hebrew,
yeah,
when you say, that's right, in verse 12, may the Lord, may Adonai
right.
reward you for your deeds. You have a full reward from Adonai. And then she says, may I continue to find favor in your sight, Adonai,
Yeah,
for you have comforted me.
yeah.
So, one more ambiguity,
Mm.
just since we're on the subject. It says, verse 3, she came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. So this is, well, maybe this isn't, I don't know if this is an ambiguity exactly, but this also touches on this issue of like human affairs and God, and how is God involved in human affairs?
That's question 5.
Oh, it is?
So we're skipping 2 and 4.
Okay, so we're talking about question 5. We made great progress
We
today
have.
compared to last
We
week.
might actually
Can
get
we
to the
have to get
questions.
to the other
Okay, we will,
questions?
okay. So, but anyway, so
That's what
where it
it's all
says,
about.
as it happened, a more literal translation is, her chance chanced. There's the noun form and then the verb.
Which verse?
Her-
Sorry.
Verse 3, her chance chanced, and she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. So, on the one hand, this is a way of saying it's, well, there's there's an incident in 1 Samuel where the Ark of the Covenant has been taken by the Philistines, and then bad things happen to the Philistines. And so they think maybe we need to get rid of this Ark of the Covenant because it's causing us bad things. So so like it's kind of a test. We'll find out if the bad things are happening because we've offended the Israelite God by sending back the Ark to the Israelites. And then we'll find out if it was their God who was bringing these bad things on us, or it was just chance. In other words, their God was not really involved. It was just, this is what was happening. We were just getting sick. People got tumors, it just happened. So, this is, so this really does mean like, it just chanced that she came on the part of the field that belonged to Boaz. So,
And that's in, I'm sorry, that's in 3?
yeah, verse 3.
3.
Here it's translated as it happened, which is a good translation, as it happened. It just happened. She didn't know. And also, it's not in any direct way implying that God providentially arranged it. If anything, it's kind of distancing God from it. It's like, in everyday life, there's a lot of things that just happen. The light happened to be red today when I got to the intersection. It's just happened,
So like in economics, they call the black swan.
Oh, I don't know. Is that where
It's
it's
like
just,
an unexpected event, like, meteorite strikes the earth and wipes out the dinosaurs.
no, not meaning like any special, extraordinary. It doesn't mean extraordinary. It just means like it just happened. Like it just happened that it was raining that day, and when I went out, I had forgotten my umbrella. It just happened.
As luck would happen.
As luck would have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just as luck would have it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's another good way of saying it happened, as luck would have it. And so that's a way of the author, he's not trying to, I don't know if he's like deliberately distancing God from the event, but he's just like saying, this is just like ordinary events where things just happen and you don't read anything into it and you don't necessarily say that was a coincidence, God must have been in it, or it just happened.
Well, you do that later.
Well, the reader, all the way from the beginning of the book, is wanting to know about what's the relationship between God and these events in these people's lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here it is in the story. It's like, well, some things happen in life where it just happens. It's just as luck would have it. So does that mean God was not involved? No, read on.
Well, then what does your question 5 mean?
Well, okay, so, well, where can God's action if he comes to me? That's
You just said we weren't supposed to glimpse it here.
Well, I didn't say in that verse, but we're talking about like
There
where,
are other verses.
yeah, like we're saying to, calling Boaz my lord out of 9, you know, it's like.
This is an ongoing conversation between me and Lance, as it so happens, because he's a big a believer in this kind of chance of things just happening, or at least maybe he is or isn't, but he's talked about it. And I've talked about the opposite view very strongly. I like to say luck is a heresy, which is sort of a joke, but I'm half serious. Because I tend to see God in everything. I tend to disbelieve in any kind of mere coincidence. So that's interesting that for it to be written right into the scripture that way, as a oh well, maybe
Stuff happens.
stuff happens.
Well, in this particular story, you could look at it as luck would have it, she wound up in Boaz's field. But we don't know how many other fields there were to begin with, how many other people owned sections of that field. And how do we not know that it was arranged spiritually for her to wind up in that field so that Boaz would notice her? I mean, we don't know. And the author of the book ain't telling.
We could, one way of looking at it is the author is saying, from her point of view, from the point of view of anybody that day,
Sure.
from the point of view of people as they're going about their life, it was just,
Even from my
Just
point
as
of view
luck
as
had
the
it.
narrator,
Huh?
even from my point of view as the narrator,
yeah,
they could be saying,
right.
As far as I know.
And yet, it's within the whole story, somehow God is working out
Yeah.
plans here.
And we probably all like to tell stories from our own lives. We thought, oh, this just happened to be this way. And then it wasn't coincidence. It was
Part of something
supposed to
larger.
happen that way.
Yeah.
You just didn't know it yet.
It's the inexplicable.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
To-
Okay,
To us,
to us,
to the human.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have time to look at at least one of the questions for application. Well,
Question
okay,
one.
so the first one really picks this up.
Sure does.
First
On
of all,
page
asking for an
48.
example of when we realized that God had been working in a hidden way through circumstances.
We're getting personal now.
Well, it's kind of useless if we don't.
I know.
Well, I don't know if this works or not, but a friend of mine invited me to go to Sacred Heart, our church in Vermont. And I met this guy while I was there.
Oh.
I'd never met him before. Turned out he was a friend of my friend, and nobody was planning it to happen.
Uh-huh.
No, he
Right.
Your chance.
Yeah.
Yes, that's luck would have it. I met this guy.
That's luck would have it. I have a big example of this. Years ago, I had dropped out of college about halfway through, and I had no plans in life, really, truly none. And one evening, one of my friends and I, we just spent the whole evening sort of driving around at night and talking, going to a diner and having coffee and then driving off and somewhere. Anyway, he said, we made our way to breakfast at a diner, and he said that he had an appointment that
That's a long
morning.
night, just driving.
They were very young.
He had an appointment with a priest who was going to be celebrating his wedding mass like later in the year, several months later. And I had kind of an interest. Oh, I had a bit of a relationship with this priest when we had been in high school, and
Were you
I'd
still
seen
going
him
to
for a
church?
while, huh?
Were you going to church at the time?
No, I wasn't going to church. I was an atheist at the time. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting to see Father Maselko. So I said, well, I'll come along with you. So we went to see Father Maselko at 8 o'clock for this meeting on Monday morning to talk about my friend's wedding plans. Well, that weekend, this priest had been at a meeting with other people who are involved in the Cursillo movement. You know, the Cursillo movement? Kind of an evangelistic movement. And he had been blown away by this guy who gave the talks, who he made a huge impression on Father Maselko. And so he was like bubbling over with all these details about what had happened over the weekend. And he mentioned that this guy was involved in the beginnings of involved in some sort of Christian community. And he said, it's just like the church is beginning all over again. It's really interesting. So I had, my one little plan was, this was in New Jersey where I lived. I was planning to just, this is the 1960s where you could travel by thumb. You know? So, and I was planning to just hitchhike out to California. So I said, why don't you get me this guy's name? He lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I'll drop in on him. This community thing sounds interesting. So he did, and I wrote this guy and said, could I come and visit you? He said, oh yeah, sure, you know. So I did. A few weeks later, you know, I checked my way from New Jersey to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and came into contact with a group of people through whom I had a conversion to the Lord, to God. I really about encountering the Lord. You know, it's really what happened to me. And it changed my entire life. So like it just chanced, it was just by, as luck would have it, that my friend and I happened to spend an entire night talking. And it happened to be the night before he was going to go see this priest. So all this stuff just kind of chanced to happen, which has had a permanent effect on my life. So that's my story for the book of Ruth. I don't have any other stories. Good. Let's see, where are we for time? Hey, we have time for more here. So out of these other three questions, is anything that anybody wants to talk about?
Question 3 is interesting.
3.
Verse 11. Well, Moses says he heard about her. Led one commentator to remark on how fine it is to report others' good deeds, yet how often we fail to do so and even spread criticism of others instead. Would you agree or disagree? And what difference does it make when we broadcast other people's charitable actions and failings? We all know what happens when we spread stories about people that are negative. In fact, doesn't St. Paul say not to do that?
Yeah.
But it also makes a difference in your impression of someone, especially if it's someone you don't know very well and someone comes to you and says, well, so-and-so has done, I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head. It changes your estimation of that person. But it also can be an inspiration to go and do likewise.
Yeah, you always get that feeling too, and when someone like is sort of habitually critical, you always you start to feel paranoid about their criticism of you. You know, and like it kind of bites back on itself, you know. And then I think too, probably in the person's interaction with themselves, the same like habituated criticism, sort of that voice of like the accuser, that kind of tends to bite on the neighbor, also probably bites back on themselves, you know, in terms of like their feelings about themselves and their capacity to have mercy on themselves.
That's a good point.
You know, another way to say accuser.
Yeah.
I admire people who are able to be appreciative of other people. because I tend to be critical of other people. That's the first thoughts that come to mind. And with some other people that I know, it's like their mind seems to work the other way.
Yeah.
It's like they're always
for the
commenting on
good.
how someone is so good at something, or did you notice how well they did that, or this person's really accomplished something, and I was like, I'd much rather be that kind of person. You know, having that appreciation, admiration for other people, that's what you notice first about people.
I think something that I felt the transformation some time ago was spiritual director. He encouraged having a sense of gratitude, starting with the good things that one has received and the good people in one's life, but then to try to see the good and even the evils one has suffered. And as I contemplated that over the years, I finally came to this question of myself: would I change anything that had life up until now, good and for ill, if it would not have led me to the point I am now? I wouldn't want to change all of the good things that are in my life now. So I have to think, well, there was this bifurcation back in 1976. Could have gone that way, but I didn't. If I'd gone that way, I wouldn't be where I am now.
It's true.
So I have to be grateful for that.
Right, it means there's something to be grateful for in all of the steps, even though there may be evils there too and suffering, but that there was something good that was at work that moved you step by step to where you are now.
We see that very profoundly in the cross itself, of course.
Mm.
You know, there were a lot of people doing a lot of very bad things that led to the crucifixion is, and out of that, everything we have, our life, our salvation.
Where is it that we say, happy the fault that has given?
So I think that's St.
such a
Augustine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and you also see in the lives of a lot of martyrs that others see their willingness to lay their lives down for what they believe. It's caused them to change and to come to faith.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the Coptic martyrs, the 21 Coptic martyrs, weren't there people who, because of their, were converted to Christianity
One
because
was.
of their witness? Oh, it was a okay.
They were all Christians except one, and he refused to be released because he wanted to die with his friends. He was a Muslim.
But I think,
Yeah,
maybe
after-
that's what I'm thinking, but I thought that other people
As a
were
consequence.
converted to
Because of
Christianity because of their witness.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
her patron, Saint Alexander, her servant died, who could have been released, said, I want to die with my lady, her, so they cut her head off too.
You were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was gonna say on the topic of criticism and mixed with like gratitude in your sense of your life, like what you Deacon shared about from St. John Climacus of like fire and water cannot mix, so neither can judgment of the other and true repentance of heart.
That's right.
And like I feel like the hesitance with criticism is like, well, I can't like totally let go of criticism, or because then how do you have order? Like how do you have feels like it needs someplace. And yeah, so I don't have an answer for that, but I feel like that's the tension I feel and people feel in their minds in general, like of like, well, you're not just gonna be like anything goes, you know, I gotta point out, you know, in my heart, and like and what is right and what is wrong. But that tension, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
looking in, because I feel like part of criticism is like looking for the problem. What is the source of, like, even in my own life, the things I don't like? Like, it's easy living in community life to be like, it's that brother, you know, like he's the son.
So obvious.
What's wrong? You know? And like, you know, and like I can't repent with that basic
Right.
assessment of existence.
Fortunately, this doesn't happen in marriage.
Maybe not in your But you know, there's also like such, and I guess as a parent and as a teacher, there's such a thing as constructive criticism. It's a way, like, okay, so you're teaching the kid how to do a math problem and they're doing it incorrectly. They're doing it wrong. And you have to show them the correct way to do it without telling them they're an idiot, you know, like, well, look at it this way, or, you know, so there is it's, which is harder to do. So there's constructive criticism as well.
That's hard sometimes.
Leading them back to the truth. is what we're
Yes,
trying to do.
yes. Two and two really does make four now. Anyway, yeah.
Just kind of a different take on this question, but, because the question talks about broadcasting one thing or another to other people, but actually this got me thinking about obituaries. You know, and how sometimes all the nice things that you have to say about somebody, they're in the obituary and you never told that person, you know, and maybe that person never really knew how you felt about their strong points or what you had done for them in their life, or and I've been on the receiving end sometimes of very unexpected positive assessments of something I've done, or somebody expressing gratitude for something I did or the way I was. And it changes your relationship with them. At least it did mine, but it also kind of affected, in certain cases, my relationship with God, because it gave me a taste of God's love for me or his kindness expressed through the person who was recognizing something about me, maybe that I hadn't, something good that I hadn't recognized about myself or that I had done. So I think it just, it makes a huge difference in changing not only an atmosphere or the way that other people think about someone, but I think it can change how a person thinks about himself when they receive that information or news or whatever, you know. So, a little different from this, but it's where my mind went. I like to read obituaries.
Well, it's always good
I
to
always
read
did,
them
it's not
and
just
find
because
out
I'm
that you're
getting
not
older.
in there.
We have finished our hour here, so we should end. And next week we'll take a look at 3.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us.
I mentioned something to you. Remember when we were talking about names? And I always liked the meaning of a name, and I never knew your daughters, never heard your
The meaning
daughter's
of a
name,
name
Tina, before.
Doesn't,
Okay, and I looked it up.
and Boaz.
Oh, well, I like to
Means
watch
kind
at
of
the
just
end
sort
of
of
the
like
years, they'll
Mr.
have
So-and-so.
something that's aspiring.
No,
Every
that's
man.
the other guy.
And it'll be
Yes,
something nice,
that's,
somebody did. Well, there's a place in Colorado.
Come up later.
It's
And this
Mr.
other woman
oh,
found
yeah.
out about
Yeah.
this group. Her mom died and her
I
mother was
remember the
knitting
character.
a sweater for her first great grandchild. And the woman didn't know how to knit, so she was looking for somebody who would finish the sweater. Well, she gets headed in the direction of this group, and this is what they do. They take your knitting and finish it for you. So they give it to this lady, and she finishes knitting the sweater, and she also finds in the bag a
The one
set
he
of mittens the
disputes
woman
with?
started, so she
Yeah.
finishes those, tells her, maybe you want these as a remembrance of your mom. Well, it turns out that the lady who is in
Just over
charge
there reading
of
it in
this
Hebrew.
group,
Yeah.
that does this knitting, her name is Bettina. And so, this woman who is talking about how pleased she is and shows a picture of the great grandchild running around in this sweater. said, you know, she really is a beloved woman because, you know, it just means so much to our family that we can pass this down and whatever. And I said, I've got to mention that to you because I had never heard the name.
Oh, yeah, here it
before.
is.
And I thought,
It's,
God, what a
it's,
pretty name, you know?
Poloni
And
Almoni.
then here's another
Oh,
one
yeah,
popping
no,
up.
even when you hear it, it sounds
Poloni
like that's
Almoni.
what it means.
Oh, and I should ask you a question. Because someone told me
was your mother's
that
name?
this,
As a form of-
Poloni Almoni,
I didn't know that. I mean, I've
Poloni
heard the name
also-
before, but I
that this is
never.
an expression also somehow
Yeah,
So how do you
in
think so?
Arabic, and then it comes into Spanish.
Oh, it went pretty well.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
it was, we had, let me see, maybe I'm not sure.
Marvin,
Her sister.
Yeah, Marvin.
brother-
There are lots of family.
someone
there.
told me that there's an expression in Spanish. Instead of like Mr. So-and-so, you could say Don Fulan,
Don Fulano,
Don Fulano.
well, Fulano means, Joe Dokes, you know, anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Don, well, yeah,
see
Don,
that? That's,
well, there's Don Fulano, Zutano, Italiano.
well,
The three, three.
Mr. So-and-so. Well, it's, that comes into Spanish from Arabic.
Fulano?
Yeah, and it's related to the word which is used in chapter 4 in Ruth,
That's interesting.
for the other relative that Boaz has to deal with. In English, it gets translated something like Mr. So-and-so.
So it means what, kinsman?
No, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, in Hebrew, it's Poloni Almoni.
What is that?
Poloni is where Fulan comes from. Poloni Almoni. It's just Mr. So-and-so.
Is it just next
It
of
doesn't
kin
get-
in this translation?
So the
See, this is verse
when the
one.
mowers were in Spain, is that when they
Yeah, they would've
picked it up? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's calling it the next of kin.
But it's not just.
All of this.
No.
Yeah.
But the Poloni is where you get the Fulano.
Yeah. So what does Boaz mean?
Well-
If it has a meaning.
Well,
You
that we
guys
know.
learn
Well,
Spanish since you're in that part of
Uh,
Yeah, we're all taking, he's fluent. I learned Spanish before I entered.
With different vowels.
So,
Yeah.
so your
O's
monastery is
means
right in
with
the area of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
our
there's,
rectory doesn't stay in the
The two
rectory.
pillars of the temple are called,
The rectory.
well, I don't know, I know that's.
When I was young, we called
Chapter 3 notes.
Pueblos.
Pueblos,
The
the caves.
pillars of the
No,
temple,
crows,
where this is,
Crows.
because
they're
of
called.
When
Oh, that's a crow.
Los
Yeah.
cuervos.
Cuervos, in strength,
Oh, right.
establishes.
Cuervo.
That's really the other way.
I don't know, this is in First Kings or in Chronicles,
Or just a Catholic.
where there's
It's
a
tiny
temple,
printed.
Well, that's, my family, Guatemala was not.
I guess it's not in,
Well, the male.
it's, maybe it's in Chronicles where there's a description of
They were liberals.
the temple.
An ancestor who
And the two,
exiled
there's
the
the two
archbishop.
pillars that are at the front
Wow.
Pain of
of the
death.
temple.
Wow.
They're called-
Wow.
Was
I
he,
think
he
one's
was
called
involved in
Yefun
government?
and the other is
Yeah, he was the
Oath.
president.
He
He's the president of
establishes
Guatemala?
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
One of your
Oh,
ancestors?
it's different vowels.
1886 to
Mhm.
1892.
Interesting.
Wow.
It's also,
So the name could be related to this,
yeah, it could be
Yeah.
related.
I'm Lily Sando.
because he's a,
It's also, there's a number of,
He was part of the.
there's a number of words,
the
There's a lot of
liberals
alliteration.
emulating the French Revolution.
and so
Then
sometimes,
Juarez and
like,
so forth, so
like with,
it totally
where she
changed
says,
everything. You know, they
I'm
seized
not,
the land of the church.
you're treating me like one of
He
your
did.
servants,
All the
and I'm not
time
even
he
one of
seized
your
the church.
servants.
Mhm.
They
So she
started
uses a word for servant there, which is different from the word that she uses later in chapter 3, when she
So all
goes
the people
talk
who
to
live there
Boaz at night.
were pushed out.
So some scholars say, oh, see, now she's shifted from just like the servant term to a term which has like a family connection type. But then other scholars will say, yeah, but maybe the reason she used the term in chapter 2, which is shifcha, is because he's used the word mishpacha,
Wow.
which is the word for
Sing
clan.
out.
Elimelech is
He was some
saying
relation
mishpacha
to.
He was
as
my
Boaz, and so shifcha
Great.
and mishpacha
Great
kind of
grandfather.
echo each other. And similarly,
And Martin has been. in trouble.
Boaz, well,
I was gonna say, that's.
and there's a couple of times in
One of the
chapter
sayings we
2
inherited from.
where the word abandon gets used.
About Claire, about Priest was,
like he says, how you abandoned,
Quitar o cura.
you left your father and mother and the land of your birth. Okay, that's
Priest.
Azav, which is the same concept that says
Wow.
Boaz.
Wow.
Well, isn't that
Interesting.
second song?
This is like, this is delivered.
The same consonants and there were no
Now,
vowels.
that was true.
Yes, although with Boaz, I think they write the O, but never, but in
Not
any
the
case,
Cavalier.
you notice it's the same.
That would
Or
be
like
the
it's another
offense.
thing.
Either they
another
were,
one like that.
none of the priests were reported.
Oh, yeah,
By that time, in the late 1800s, they were starting to report them.
she takes home, let's see which verse is this?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, verse 17, she gleaned and it came to her.
That's
Yeah. Barley.
Yeah.
And when she
It
gets
didn't
home,
reach the
the
level of
next verse,
Mexico.
her mother-in-law says, Apho, did you glean today? Where?
Eliminated the Jesuits.
So she brings an Ephah, and her
It's kind
mother
of just
says,
playful.
where?
Playful language.
Yeah, so it's playful.
Yeah.
So then, like some scholars would say, so don't worry too much about what Boaz means,
Yeah.
because his part is like, it's the opposite of Azab.
An email.
Azab,
Send you,
you know, Ephah and Apho.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shifcha
That'd be
and
great.
Mishpacha,
It'd
so
be really.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's the word, you know.
Poetic choice.
Yeah, wait,
Yeah.
I mean,
Very
it's-
active.
Nice.
Very-
So Father John, are you taking up juggling?
This, no, I tried when I was little, I never got very far with it. This is for Veronica.
Ah,
Priest there for the, you know,
yes, born books,
But it's a lay, that's a lay movement.
the DK books.
That's the, you know, baptismal promise of Christians.
And it's something that's like
Well, rumor